Good morning, everyone, or afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the next edition of the Future of Contingent Workforce 2025 Mid-Year Review EU edition. Today we have the best industry leaders in contingent labor in Europe to talk about the state of where we are today. We're going to look back at some of the predictions that we made in January about trends. And to be fair, there are some market forces that we weren't anticipating, such as tariffs and the dollar dropping by 10%, amongst other things. There are major catalysts on how companies. Those are major catalysts on how companies budget, manage their business, and how they hire, and that directly affects all of us. We'll also touch upon some use cases for AI, trends in total talent management, and the latest in skills-based hiring. I'm excited for today's discussion with our amazing panelists of guests. Manfred Vogels, he's a VP of EMEA Markets for Beeline. Simon Bradbury, VP of Markets EMEA and APAC for Allegis Global Solutions. Ines Noble, Global Head of Product Strategy and Solution Design for Tapfin. Jaqueen Wyatt, for SVP of Regional Head of EMEA and APAC for Pontoon Solutions. And Kieran Scally-Card, SVP and Head of Workforce Solutions for Acro Service Corp. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So
how you doing?
Good, how are you? So I think the first thing we're going to do is go back at our predictions from the beginning of the year. So Manfred, it looks like at the beginning of Q4, the decline we'd seen for years was coming up to stop. Looks like the industry is picking up. We see emerging markets like Poland and Spain looking cautiously at Germany selections, what could mean in terms of impact on the labor market. So now, how do you feel about those statements?
Well, thanks. It's good to hear that you hold me accountable for everything that I say in these kind of calls. So that's good to know. I'm going to be a little bit more cautious this time. All jokes aside, my statement from Q4 last year has actually came through, right? So what we do see, and it's not a massive trend, I would say, but what we do see is that, the drop-off of hours, the drop-off of new assignments on a week-by-week, weekly basis, that is now going in the right direction after years of decline year on year. We now see definitely since end of last year, beginning of this year, a stabilization. And depending on which industry you look at, even a positive sign, right? Industries that are definitely upcoming are the entire energy section, utilities. What we see there is definitely a large uptick in our utility clients, I would say, across the board. And when I say across the board in EMEA, and defense, nobody would look surprised against that, right? So all kinds of organizations that are either fully or partially working in the defense aerospace industry, we definitely see a large uptick there. So that is picking up. Country by country basis, I think across the board, typical high penetrated markets like the UK and the Netherlands are still, -2, -1, not a big uptake in that regard. Poland remains a strong grower from our perspective. Mm-hmm. Spain is a little bit leaping behind as well. So all in all, I would say what I predicted and what I said at the end of Q4 last year has came through, with the exception perhaps of Spain. But yeah, we're definitely seeing some positive trends.
Okay, great. And what's your prediction for the second half?
So again, for the second half. Oh, sorry. Second half. Yeah. Okay. Here we go again. I think what we see now will continue to grow. I think there's definitely some economic upturn getting ahead of ourselves. Not saying that there will be pressure on the market when it comes down to cost. But I do think, especially with what's going on in the entire world and the dynamics around, rearming the EMEA region, NATO, et cetera, I think that has such an impact in a positive way that overall the market, I'm quite positive. We also see the deal velocity picking up. So Again, we won't be ending at same levels as we had, after Corona or prior to Corona in that sense. But I think we are definitely looking towards a continuation of the upward trend.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. And Simon, you had mentioned client frustration in the market has been going the same way for a long time. Clients want to do something different or look for some different models and waiting for the market to get a little better before they do something differently. Do you still agree with that statement?
Yeah, we were talking about this the other day, and you read that to me. I'm rarely lost for words, but I was like, I looked at that and I was like, I don't really know what I have to say about the words that came out of my own mouth, because I was just like, I just sort of like shrugged my shoulders. I was like, yeah, I think so. But I thought so it was a little bit nonplussed by my own speech there. But I think that I do think there is frustration out there that there's a kind of stagnation feeling, and about the market, like a lot, and about products a little bit, like from us, and as well. So by the market, I mean volumes and like economic activity and stuff like that, and by products, I mean like stuff that's on offer. I do think that there's definitely a little bit of a shift there, and I would agree with what Manfred just said a moment ago. I'd agree with one thing he said, and actually possibly not quite agree with the second thing. I think that I see like deal velocity. There are organizations out there that really want to do stuff, and it's been busy this year, busier than the last few years, and I think that doesn't seem to be going anywhere. So I definitely agree with that. I feel that there's a bit more ambition in what clients are looking for than there probably has been. That's definitely like edging up in terms of sophistication and so on. I'm not quite as positive about the market. And I hope I'm wrong and Manfred's right. And it's only because the underlying, like if I look at it's very difficult when you look at your own individual company performance, because that's obviously just one snapshot from one particular perspective. Yeah. But when I look at like the staffing companies' results in Europe for the first quarter of the year, they're not a great read, and so I worry that even stabilization would look pretty good right now. We definitely do. Actually, I would agree from a certain aspect with what Manfred's saying, that we are definitely seeing stabilization and some uptick. But my worry is that that's isolated, and also I'm probably a little bit burnt that I feel like there's been a couple of false dawns over the last couple of years. I've been a little bit overly positive about the market in general. So time will tell on that one. But I would definitely vote for Manfred on that over me.
Interesting. Okay, great. And then Jackie, what are your predictions for the second half of the year?
Yeah, thank you. Look, I would probably concur a bit with what you're seeing, Simon and Manfred, but I think the other element to consider, I think, is the EU Work Platform Directive that was launched in 2004. That now comes in full effect, December 2026 this year. So I think a lot of organizations have kind of parked that last year and now are saying, wow, we have 6 months to get our ducks lined up, 12 months to get our ducks lined up. And because of that, we're seeing quite a move to social procurement. So I think organizations wanting to make sure that they've got their risk categorized, their workforce classification guidelines set up, that they've got good hygiene around how they're engaging workers in terms of what types of workers, why and how. But I think certainly we're seeing, I think that combined with the global economic environment, we're seeing probably some pause still before we're seeing, and I think any forms of rapid growth. Where we are seeing growth, and I think these are almost kind of recession-proof markets, if you like, in the sectors, for example, of healthcare. That continues. We continue to have an aging population. So I think there's some sectors that are resistant, healthcare and life sciences being one of them. But I think outside that, I think the directive certainly is changing how organizations view their workforce. And I would say probably now gig workers, use of freelance platforms, and of course, and so it's becoming quite a strong, I think, theme we're seeing come through, certainly in Europe at the moment.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I guess what are your predictions?
In terms of predictions, I think we're still kind of tracking. I think we're still on target. I think for growth year on year, and I think that we're saying still, I think we're tracking it around 40% of the workforce, the total workforce in Europe, will be contingent by the end of this year. That was prediction, I think, at the start of the year. And certainly, I think we're seeing markets like France, Germany, UK, that's certainly coming to fruition.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And what are your thoughts on a prediction?
I certainly agree with the predictions that we've heard so far is in relation to the markets, the growth, and what we're seeing from a client perspective. I think certainly from an industry standpoint, the need to be agile and creative as we look at new models that are emerging from a blended capacity, a blend between CW and SOW to ensure that they have access to everything they need. As we see more offshoring and nearshoring as well, to do more with less from a cost perspective as well. The use of artificial intelligence to be able to kind of really maximize the human element within either programs or how businesses are running. And really maximize the strategic input that an organization is receiving and automating as much of that manual tactical component as possible, I think is what we're going to see in the next 6 to 12 months.
Interesting. And Karen, what are your thoughts?
So also agree with everybody's comments. I think when I think about the non-employee labor space, I think we're genuinely at an inflection point now. A lot of companies are, the legislation, geopolitics, the nature of non-employee labor is changing almost daily right now. And I think a lot of companies do want to do more. They do want to get smarter, look at their compliance, look at their risk management and risk mitigation, but they're maybe not sure quite how to do it. A lot of clients that I talk to specifically in Europe, they are looking for guidance and help on how do we expand our program internationally, and specifically how do we do that safely from a compliance and a risk mitigation perspective. Also, the Manfred and Simon mentioned before, with the defense and the military and the rearming of NATO and the European region, that market is booming right now. However, that does bring compliance risks, keeping out applicants from places and countries that you don't want them coming in from because of risk. So I think that's definitely increasing. Also on the services procurement side, again, what I see is legislation progressively changing on the staff augmentation market. And there's a lot of push, sometimes incorrectly, to misclassify as SOW, but there's definitely a lot of push to get more into contingent workforce programs, but to do it safely. So again, just the last point, Jackie mentioned this, healthcare, pharmaceutical, military defense, all booming, and a lot of focus right now.
Absolutely. So, I mean, given kind of the instability or navigating the turmoil, partly triggered by like the tariffs, and when companies not, like especially CPG companies not understanding their costs of goods, it's hard to sort of build a business around an environment where you can't figure out what your base cost is going to be. Has that triggered more offshoring in Europe? Like, do you see that sort of trend increasing just because if you can't figure out your cost of products, maybe you can reduce your cost of service?
Right. So I'll kind of kick that one off, I guess. What we see with a lot of clients is, you're right, the tariffs and a lot of situation changing on cost and moving manufacturing different places, different countries, nearshoring, offshoring, all of that sort of stuff. I think there's definitely a knee-jerk reaction that I see from organizations that I talk to them in terms of, okay, there's tariffs or there's a pressure on cost, just cut heads, just reduce the head count. And a lot of organizations don't see there are many, many ways to reduce your cost outside of just slashing heads. If you're optimizing, if you're rationalizing, and yes, where the work is done, offshoring, nearshoring. So all of those things play a part. And I would just encourage organizations to don't just take the knee-jerk reaction approach of slashing things, because there are many ways that you can reduce your cost and optimize. But to touch on your question, yes, we are seeing organizations offshore and nearshore. it varies by the organization and the sector, but we're seeing a lot of that. But again, my final point would be, don't just knee-jerk react. If you're not sure how to do it, talk to your partners, talk to your MSP, talk to your workforce solution partner, talk to an independent. Get the education and the guidance to know what levers you can pull before you just knee-jerk react.
Mm-hmm. Jackie, you want to add to that?
Yes, a good point, Karen. And I think also just to add to that, what we're seeing is this kind of, I mentioned before, this kind of evolution or lean towards services procurement. I think because of that, organizations are then really taking a forensic look at what is the core skills they want to keep in-house, stay in-sourced, and then what are they outsourcing? So what's genuinely an outsourced requirement? And again, what is genuinely a skill-based requirement as opposed to a bona fide outsourced piece of work. So I think the tariffs combined with the nearshoring, offshoring, combined with also, I think, the EU work directive, I think it's put a lot more pressure on organizations to get really forensic around what are they outsourcing, what are they not, and then how does that impact their future state. So I think we'll see more of that, and I think we're seeing then more of a change in terms of what organizations are reliant on when they're working with an MSP provider, that the role of MSP is evolving to be far more consultative and helping organizations, re-engineer how do they curate their workforce. And part of what we're doing at Pontoon through our consulting brand is really helping organizations solve for that. I think the traditional days of MSPs providing contingent T&M labor, what I would call version 1.0, I think they're behind us. And so I think we're seeing a shift on the buyer side, on the client expectations, and certainly how we as an industry are showing up.
No, absolutely. And Ines, what are you thinking around this?
Yeah, I really liked what Jackie said around kind of services procurement. I completely agree. I certainly think that the clients are demanding greater visibility, not just into the headcount, but certainly the costs around it. Also ensuring the quality as well by having more outcome-based work done instead of the T&M that Jackie was talking about as well is certainly the way that I see the market is moving for sure. I see kind of a real reliance on making sure that supplier mix is right. If we forget about classification for now, what is the right sourcing mix? What is the right supplier mix that needs to be within that program, depending on the industry? Depending on the offshoring, nearshoring strategy that particular client or organization has, is what's really key to making sure that the right strategy for that is correct. So kind of looking at omni-channel sourcing and not just focusing on the traditional swim lanes that we're all used to, kind of really opening that up. It's not a fork in the road. That fork is a lot bigger and there are more problems.
No, absolutely.
Are the swim lanes even there now?
I'm gonna add to this. I want you to respond to this question too, but I want to add to this. So, given like what Ines is talking about, channel strategies and the multiple ways that we procure talent, are you seeing not only the offshore trend, but are you seeing the adoption of the MSP managing both SOW, contingent? Because a lot of times in the past, there wasn't a total talent management solution that clients would let us implement. And then also including sort of the cloud freelance marketplace inside the MSP.
100%. Independent contractors, freelancers are certainly front of mind, front of focus. The way to kind of work with them has always been, I'd say, more to the right and kind of not in the MSP, kind of always been an afterthought. Yeah. Organizations are wanting one way to manage their entire contingent population, regardless of the classification. So with them demanding greater visibility means bringing in services procurement, SOWs, bringing in independent contractors, freelancers, and having a technology or an ecosystem of technologies that allows us to be able to do that in a compliant manner, because the complexity that we see across Europe, if we look at the Netherlands, look at the UK, look at all the legislation that has been coming out and is continuing to come out over the last 2-5 years, it's going to get more complex. So having that visibility and compliance is extremely important.
Absolutely. Simon, and your thoughts?
Yeah, so I think that a lot of this is a massive opportunity for the industry, because again, there's no doubt about it that there's a increasing in breadth of scope, to do with freelancers and statement of work. I mean, I would say more than half of the deals that are coming out now from an MSP perspective would have statement of work as part of them, either as a definitive
Absolutely.
phase 2 or part of phase 1, and there are even deals out there which are SOW only. But I would say there's a more, in the marketplace, there's a more homogenous approach to what does an MSP look like. Like if you lined up 5 or 6 MSP providers, they would look not that wildly different. There'd be differences. If you lined up 5 or 6 SOW services, even across different organizations with the same provider, they probably look very, very different, because there's all sorts of different levels of engagement in terms of, just headcount tracking, onboarding, offboarding, running end-to-end RFP processes, measuring deliverables, all that kind of stuff. Is there an AI solution as part of it? It's really like wildly different under that one label. But where I think the opportunity is, I'm going to be much more positive now than I was the first time I spoke, which is great news for everybody, is that I think that if you look at it through the client's lens, there is on the one side of the market, they see like Big Four, Big Four plus, let's call it, like advisory firms. And then on the other side of the market, they see like your traditional like staffing providers with MSP, and I know we're talking contingent today, but RPO, etc. There's quite a big gap in the middle. On one side, you've got kind of broad but not deep expertise, advisors but not doers, expensive but seen as genuinely very neutral. On the other hand, you've got an industry which is deep expertise in the workforce marketplace, doers that actually deliver on what the conversation's about, but don't quite have the branding or the credentials in the same way to offer that kind of neutrality, advisory, like a lot of us aspire to be there, but if we're honest, it's not quite the same. But that's the opportunity, because there's an enormous market there, and it's not just an opportunity financially, it's an opportunity from an influence perspective and from a long-term future perspective, because I think the traditional markets that we've operated in are becoming more homogenous and more transactional, and this is our opportunity to move into that space and give customers what they want, but it involves a bit of a change of behavior. So I definitely see that, and I definitely see a demand for that. And that, for example, an interesting example of a potential conflict of interest there is that it doesn't matter if you're a VMS provider or an MSP provider. Typically, your commercial reward is linked to spend, but what clients really want us to do is reduce their spend. Right. Yeah. So how do we square that circle and make sure that we're being truly giving honest, neutral advice in the best interest of the customer, and yet still works, commercially for us as organizations as well. I think if we crack that nut collectively between us, there's a massive opportunity to move into a whole new area of the market.
So do you think that when buyers are looking at how they're looking at spend, right, there's the spend component, which you want to see cost savings on, but should they put the consulting and strategy dollars in a different bucket so that they can leverage you guys appropriately and actually get the right service without compromise? Because if spend goes down, then you can't bring services as well as you could, right? Because you have still in the business making money.
An example would be, and I'll relay a conversation I was having with a client recently, and there was a price conversation taking place, and I said, well, we've based it. They've said, well, you're charging us X, and I was like, we're not charging you anything like that. And they said, well, you take this number, our services spend, and multiply it by your price. That's your revenue. I'm like, no, it's not, because first of all, are you guaranteeing that all of that spend is going to come into a program? Which, if you are, let me know. Oh no, we're not guaranteeing that. Okay. Secondly, isn't part of our objective to reduce that spend? Like, so let me say that I take 50%, just to pick a number, and you're taking 100%. I said, the one thing I can promise you is it's never going to be that 100%. And if it is, we're not doing our job, because that's what we're coming in to do, is to reduce that number. So that's an example of the old world meeting the new world, and then you've got to figure out a way forward of how does it operate. Not an issue if you're one of the Big Four, because you don't have to actually deliver on anything. You're just charging on a time and materials basis for the advice that you're giving. But actually, here's the magic of it, which I think is a bit of an unspoken secret at the moment is we know this stuff better. Right? Now, we're actually better experts in this stuff in delivering it than a lot of the very, very expensive big consultancy firms are, because we're buried in the reality of it on a day-to-day basis. And so that's where I see the opportunity is. I'm not saying it's been cracked, but that's where I see it.
I mean, here's the other interesting in the comment you just said is that you pay a Big Four, let's say $3 million to do a consulting project to figure out how to cut costs, and then you end up cutting $1.5 million. So you're actually negative 1.5 on it. And so you make that up over 3 years, maybe, but the first year you end up losing money on that cost savings of effort because you've done it with something that maybe doesn't make sense. Manfred, I want to kind of just talk real quick about like the fact that we are adding these different services as MSPs and VMS providers. You guys recently acquired MBO. And so how does that change the game on what a VMS looks like?
Well, changes the game, but that in 2027, I'm the only one on this panel left to discuss, because we pushed out a lot of MSPs out of business.
Nice.
I just made another prediction that's gonna hold me. No, all jokes aside, before I answer your question, a lot of interesting things have been said. I just want to give it our angle, right? A lot of these strategies, a lot of these decisions that you, Kieran, mentioned, and hey, where you can get savings, and where do I need to expand the program towards, to what are my strategic decisions, what part am I going to outsource, nearshore, offshore, et cetera, all being driven by data, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's where, and again, I'm speaking on behalf of all of the VMS providers, that's where VMS comes into play, because it provides that data. It provides the transparency that allows companies and MSPs to make decisions. Where I see definitely an uptick with all three Kieran. I think we still have some catching up to do, but definitely we see our partners more and more getting ourselves into conversations is around that strategy, is around, okay, here's the data. Now, what is the data telling us, right? What options do we have? And this is also where, from a development perspective, from our view, for instance, that is where we're definitely massive scale implementing AI to help us digest that data and to help us extract that data in, okay, here are the choices that you have, and here's what you can do, right? So it's definitely touching all of the things that all of the people said, and I just want to underline, you need data, and we happen to have a lot of data that actually helps you and helps the end client in order to make these kind of decisions. I guess one of the things where we, that is driving us to acquire MBO is that, we started to notice that we actually got often the question, what can Beeline do in this respect when it comes down to, EOR, AOR business, because we do have a lot of freelancers, right? And sometimes they're even managed via our VMS system. And that's where I think, we saw a golden opportunity to actually move ourselves and elevate ourselves towards, let's call it total talent management, to provide a solution that, next to giving you the technical solution in order to manage all of that, we actually are also extending our service now, that we can, make sure that all of these freelancers are properly vetted, properly set up, and in many occasions also being paid. Now, that doesn't mean that we, have an interest to do what a lot of our MSP partners can do as well. It's more of an add-on service, because let's not forget it, from our perspective, half of our clients use an MSP, half of them do not use an MSP, right? So there's a lot for us to gain anyway, and we remain flexible. If clients already have a solution in play with other partners out there, that's fine with us. We are trying to make our solution in such a way that it's easy to connect with other providers out there, and there are many in this space, whether they're MSP related or like MBO. So, but for us, it is a step towards being capable of providing a service that really takes the next step to the next level in terms of total talent management.
Interesting. And then where do you guys feel about like last year, there's a big topic around skills-based hiring, and are companies ready to do this, and is it going to work, and is it more efficient? And I'm going to add to the skills-based hiring, where are we with that? But also to the, do you think we're going to ever get the conversation from cost savings to revenue generation, right? Like for me to deliver product, people, or skills to you faster is actually going to increase your bottom line, because we're going to help you accelerate your growth, because we're going to bring those people that we're bringing to you are going to bring your products to market faster. Like, do you ever see that shift happening? Because I kind of feel like AI is also helping with that story. But Simon, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the skills-based thing first.
I will try not to take up the remaining 30 minutes on this topic. That would be very unfair. So I think that the whole kind of, I'm going to call it the skills first agenda, skills first, skills-based organization, skills-based hiring I think it's failing. And I think it's failing. I don't think it's because it's wrong. But I think that the promise that was made in terms of the transformation it was going to give to organizations has just not been met. And a lot of organizations are now questioning, well, hang on a minute, we've done a lot here. We spent a fortune on advisory. We spent a fortune on tech. And we're just not seeing what we thought we were going to see. And I mean, I've had this conversation with a couple of people from household name organizations, global organizations, whose job title is head of skills-based organization, and they say that, right? So we've got some real challenges there. My perspective is, it's not about skills. Skills is, and that's not because skills is wrong. It's because skills is only one piece of the jigsaw, and the jigsaw really is about moving from recruitment as a reactive process. And by reactive, I mean, first of all, the whole process is reactive. We get a job spec and then we start, looking for people, whatever. But actually, like, a job spec is literally the most reactive thing you can have, because it basically says, it's the definition of, this is how we've done it in the past, right? So that doesn't really play into the how can we do things differently? Can we use AI? Can we use AI augmented? Can we automate? All that kind of stuff. It's just you've lost already at that point. But predictive recruitment is basically saying, how do we be successful in the future? What does success look like? And organizations just aren't set up for that. And it's a big change. So what I predict is that you'll start to see organizations trying this move away from reactive to predictive, of which skills is part, but it's only part. And that will happen in pilots, silos, individual departments, because it's just too big a change enterprise wide. And secondly, I would say that there's been too much of a focus on inferred skills, using technology on an enterprise wide scale to infer skills, and not enough to actually test skills and actually check what the skills are. So if you think about why skills based in the first place, or why skills first approach in the first place, it's because a 10-year project manager they're not necessarily better than a 2-year project manager. Like, it depends on what their skill set are. So the idea is, you don't rely on experience, you actually look at the skills. But if you then get a bit of tech in that is ultimately predominantly looking at background and experience, and yes, some other areas of how they interact and so on, to infer what the skills are, I'm nervous that you've just dug a hole and filled it back in again, but with some clever technology rather than actually understanding. So they'd be my two things. I think we'll start seeing experimentation in individual areas, and I think we'll see more skills testing.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree with that. Jackie, what are your thoughts around that?
It's interesting. Listen to Simon there. I think it's interesting. I think we did a survey recently, and in our survey, what came back was only 46% of companies have a proper skills-based job taxonomy. So I think a lot of organizations are recognizing that it's the way forward and it's the future state imperative. But I would say we're probably seeing almost 3 categories of adoption. We've got the large organizations that are saying, okay, we have a problem we need to solve for. And that starts with having, I think, a skills-based job taxonomy. And I think they're organizations that have enough muscle and enough weight to put resource behind that. But it's a big lift if you've got people in HR and TA and probably procurement who also have day jobs, right? So I think we're seeing more of an acknowledgement and a slow turn from the large organizations. But I would say that the other end of the spectrum, you have your perhaps SMEs, what I would call, perhaps aspirational, but just don't have the bandwidth, the know-how to get there. So I think there's an appetite and there's an awareness, but I think that stat around the taxonomy, I think, speaks volumes around the fact that we're not quite there. We're working with a customer now who's looking to move to that over a 2-year time frame. They've had some very expensive consultants in that have kind of scratched their heads and I think helping them diagnose globally what that taxonomy looks like. But again, that's work in progress. So I think there's the scientific element, but also then the change management element around how you then take your hiring population on that journey and how you change those buying behaviors. And I think then once those two elements are solved for, I think then the MSP role has to change. And of course, so does how we dance with the BMS in terms of then making sure we have good program governance, good triage processes, good triage consultative, service, but also I think how we then use AI to support that triage once we have that taxonomy. So I think there are so many elements, and I think we're probably in reality still 18, 24 months away from that being, a change in how we work. What's also interesting, though, I think, is that the European Commission have also launched, I think, in March this year, this Union of Skills initiative, where I believe they've trained over 6 million plus workers on kind of recognizing that the drive towards a skills-based environment. So I think it's interesting that I think there's government policy supporting this. So I think with government policy in the EU, I think with the appetite for organizations to move there, then the element of AI and agentic AI, how does that impact? I think it's more complex than just a job taxonomy solution. I think we could have like another half day on this, couldn't we? But certainly I think it's something I'm predicting will take a good 18, 24 months to evolve to where the future state really should be sitting.
Yeah, I agree with both you guys. I think probably one of the biggest things that was missing from this was that his ability of inference, right? There's a kind of an inference around skills-based hiring. And I think what no one's really doing right now from what I see in the AI field is everyone's like looking at matching technologies and things like that, but they're not looking at like, are there people in my company in the right spots, right? And if you can use inference and data to figure out, and generative AI to figure out like, maybe she shouldn't be a salesperson, he should be an ops person, and let's put him in that place. And then now he's happier and he's productive and he's giving value to the company. So I think that's probably the missing component is inference around this.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask about sort of generative AI and agentic AI, and we'll kind of combine this with like the fraud that's out there and different things. But I can tell you, clients will ask me in an RFP, how do you use AI in your company? And then we talk about how we're using the back-end matching technologies. We're using it for ops to sort of make us more efficient, invoicing process. And then in the next step, the next question will say, do you agree not to use it with us? It's almost like they want you to do it, and they want you to passively say that you're not going to do it, but they know you're still implied to do it, but they just want to take away the liability. And so that kind of, and then we're also using it to sort of, we've seen this increase of North Korean workers posing as EU and American workers and trying to basically get laptops shipped to different places and hacking into US systems and European systems. And so we put AI into sort of matching to whether their resume matches their LinkedIn profile to their address when we're on the background check match where they're asking us to ship stuff, right? Because a lot of times they're doing, or their bank account switching constantly. And so there's different flags that we can use to match AI. But given all the stuff I just kind of alluded to you,
that was a lot.
That's a lot.
What are your thoughts on AI, how it's being adopted by clients, and does it have a place today, or is the liability too great and the indemnification around that?
Look, the reality, we as humans, we've been using AI for a long time, period, right? It's how we're introducing it into the overarching process as we look at the omni-channels that we've been talking about. I'll touch upon the RFP component. You're 100% right. It's not just in RFPs, it's our existing client portfolio as well. You know, what AI are you using as an organization? What AI are you going to introduce into our program? And I think that all comes down and back to gaining that visibility, gaining that compliance, and gaining that cost control that they're looking for. So they want to know how we are automating that, but also reducing the risk from bringing bias to the table. How do we ensure that it's non-biased? So they want those enhanced efficiencies and insights, but they are worried about data privacy, IP risks, and that regulatory compliance. Jackie's touched upon it a few times throughout the live session today about the compliance that's coming out around workers. But, you know, the compliance and legislation that's coming out around AI in Europe and is continuously evolving is something that we need to be cautious of. So I think making sure that clients understand and have full visibility and transparency in what we are using AI for, how we are ensuring that we are removing bias from that with the AI that we're using, and really making sure that there's AI governance in place is what clients want. They want that safe pair of hands like they do when they outsource anything. You know, it's the same when they look at us and we're leveraging AI. How are we ensuring that, you know, there is clear decision boundaries, that there's audit trails, that there's ethical use policies, and there is that visibility and transparency to give them that comfort? I don't think that comfort's there yet because there's a lot of unknowns and a lot of organizations don't want to be the first. I also think it depends on the industry. Highly regulated industries is where we are seeing the big, don't use AI, don't touch AI, don't even look at AI as we kind of move forwards when we're implementing those programs. But then you do have some trailblazers, especially in some of the smaller organizations, some of the smaller volume opportunities. How can we automate to ensure that they get the service that they want to by leveraging AI and automation as well? And I'll touch upon the last piece that you mentioned around fraud and kind of what we're seeing. And then I think I've touched upon all of the points that you threw out there, Ash. We're certainly seeing, obviously, a lot of increased complexity, a lot of fear around a lot of the fraud that we've seen. It's in the press. Our clients are experiencing it. And I think you touched upon, you know, it's that enhanced vetting, making sure that we're doing those background checks. Device access and controls, so really making sure that there's something in place that ensures that those protocols are met, and you know, an AI agent or somebody in a different country doesn't get through that firewall unless obviously there are those right protocols in place. And then obviously there's a lot out there from an AI fraud detection perspective. And we're seeing a lot of clients looking to us to make recommendations from a tech ecosystem perspective and how we kind of do that. Did I miss anything, Ash?
No, that was wonderful. Thank you so much. And Kieran, you're going to go next, but I'm going to add one more thing to this question is, are you seeing companies, MSPs specifically, stand up AI audit practices so that they can make sure that they're compliant and helping their customers make sure their vendors are compliant around what's changing?
It's almost like I prepped you for that question. So first of all, I agree with everything Ines said. That's a very difficult one to come after Ines on that. But in relation to your question, Ashish, I would say, you know, there's in terms of AI in general, it's human nature. People fear what they don't understand. And I agree that we've used AI as human beings for a long time. It's just packaged differently now. So there's a lot of uncertainty. And I think there's definitely that education piece that needs to happen. However, what I see, and we all see it, it seems like every conversation you have or everything you see on LinkedIn or every article that you see somewhere, there's a new AI thing, right? Or a new AI magical tool that's been created. But if you drill into most of that, the bulk of that is what I would say on the front end. So the recruitment piece, the skill matching piece, all of that sort of thing, which is great. But when you look at what I'll call the back end, the audit, the compliance, the risk mitigation, there's not a lot of noise in that space right now, because it seems like most of the people, companies that are developing that technology, they're focusing on the front end. So where I believe the benefit is for agentic AI, I come from financial services in-house before I actually moved into this space. So very heavily regulated market. And where I see the value of AI is in the audit, the compliance. So making sure that the system is doing what you need it to do to protect yourself, right? But there does need to be governance around it. I think there's definitely a trick being missed by organizations who are creating this AI, these AI boxes, I'll call them. They're focusing on the front end. There's not many people focusing on the compliance, risk mitigation, governance, audit perspective. So that's one thing that we talk to clients about when you are thinking about agentic AI. Don't just think about the skill matching. Don't think about the recruitment, especially with military, defense, financial services. Think about your audit. Think about, is the system, is the machine doing what you need it to do safely? And AI can help you with that. But again, it's the education. A lot of clients are afraid of it, especially as Ines mentioned, financial services, military, defense. There is that inherent fear because they don't understand it properly yet. But for me, that's a big development area that we need to flesh out to get agentic AI used for compliance risk mitigation.
No, absolutely. Those are great points. And Manfred, I'm going to ask you a bit on top of what Karen said is with AI, there is a lot of noise out there. And I think there is some efficiencies that have been created, but then there's also some inefficiencies created. And I'll give you an example. Like my team used to send me 2-line emails saying, hey, and then ask me a question. And now I'm getting 3 paragraphs and I have to take that and put it into that GPT and get it summarized back to 2 lines so I could actually respond and start taking much time. And so, and then you hear all these things about tech and developers being replaced and there's fear around it. And from what I've seen, and I saw a study recently, it is helping the average person who doesn't know how to code develop content much faster, right? And even builds like websites and things like that. But it's not replacing the hardcore engineer today. It's actually creating more work for the hardcore engineer because they have to go through and edit and QA the code that's being generated. So we may get there at some point, but today the jobs are there. They're still going to be there. The new jobs are going to get created, but I don't think there's fear. Just the fear shouldn't be as big as it is about no one's going to have jobs anymore. And so what are you seeing with AI and how is Beeline feeling about this in the space?
Well, obviously, it's as a tech provider, something that we have way up there on our development list, on our prioritization list, and we're doing a lot of stuff. It goes in all kinds of directions, right? Yes, we're focusing on how can we get the skills matching combined with the job description better aligned, for instance, right? How can we speed up and make the candidate selection more efficient? Also from the basis that, there needs to be a human person in the loop. But also to your point, Kieran, we're looking at, and this was one of the benefits with the acquisition of MBO, because they have also state-of-the-art technology in, is this a real person that I'm talking to during the interview, right? So we're rolling that out towards our clients, incorporating that in the Beeline VMS, but also from a procurement perspective, right? I did quite an interesting presentation during the last SIA. Basically, reports that are available on every VMS, how to use them in order to ultimately create a playbook to enable my procurement to do better negotiations, right? So it is across all facets. And also internally, we're looking at, okay, from a product development perspective, where can we make shortcuts? The thing is, though, but that's my personal observation, we label a lot of things as AI, where I'm like, I have my reasonable doubts if that is AI, right? I think we're using already AI from that perspective in the last 10 years. And, I now see things even in our functionality being relabeled as AI, where, we used to position them in a different way. The second thing is, and that's my strict personal observation, I see more and more people having the doubts of what AI actually gives me back, right? And to share a funny example of that, we ran a couple of scenarios. Okay, let's assume we're one of our bigger competitors, right? We're in the sales page. What would AI say are the weak spots of the Beeline VMS platform, right? And we got all the answers. And then we reversed it and did the same thing, presenting it from a different angle, and guess what? We got the same answers, right? So we're like, yeah, okay, what does AI tell us, right? I took a personal example. We have elections coming up in the Netherlands where I took all of directly from the website from a political party what they find as this is important, and then asked AI several platforms, okay, what is your recommendation if these are all the points literally copied over is something that I actually have as a high standard, and it gave me all kinds of options except the one where I got the data source from, right? So you start thinking like, yeah, okay, what is AI giving me back and how trustworthy is that? And that ties back to our firm belief that at the end of the day, whatever we do, there always needs to be a human in the loop that makes an end decision. That's our core, and that's what we will continue believe in, despite the fact that I have clients that say, oh, could your technology select the best candidate for me? Well, potentially, technically it could, but we don't want to go there. It can help you. It can help you drive the assessment quicker, more easy, more efficient, et cetera, but ultimately you still need some human being to talk to people, to interview them, and to get their human decision in order. Yeah, I like Simon more than Kieran or the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Matt,
Simon-
that's a good point, Matt. But I think I really agree with the concept around the role of the human. I think sometimes as a society, we fear the unknown, don't we? But I think, for the very example, we now have a partnership with Salesforce, where we've launched Ada, which is an AI agent that helps then manage the entire search, interview, shortlist procedure. All that does is helps take a lot of the volume-based processing work out of the recruitment, but it doesn't negate the importance of the recruiter then interfacing and matching. And I think it then gives the recruiter more time to do that work with a high touch rather than being time poor because they're trying to process 1,000 resumes on one role. So I think it helps us deliver a better candidate experience and a better hiring manager experience if used in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. And then Simon, I'm going to add to this AI question to you is, where is the opportunity that we're missing, that we're not using it, that we should be in the corporate side?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of comments first on stuff that's just been said. First of all, Manfred, you just said 3 times, what is AI is giving us back? What is it doing? Like, AI is listening, right? You know that, right? So that's now out there in the digital world. Like, they might not come to get you yet, but they're coming to get you one day, right? They're going to store it away, and you need to be checking. You need to be checking, watching your back.
You.
AI won't forget. I just like to say I think AI is wonderful. Just please note that, any AI bots that are listening. I would also say that so one area actually that I just want us to touch on, which is half answering your question, is we haven't really talked much about how AI is impacting applications and the applicant process, because it really is. And we've got our India business has seen a doubling in applications on average per role in about the last 9 months. Mm-hmm. And also the applicability of the fit of applications per role is better, and that's because candidates are using AI so much more to do a higher volume of applications. I'm not just talking about contingent here. I'm broadening this out to permanent hiring as well. But of course, like we're doing everything that we're doing, taking into consideration that we've got to take into consideration that the behaviour of everyone is being changed by this, and so I think that's really like we're trying to wrestle with that a little bit, because we're trying to understand. And again, like making sure you've got processes for making sure that if tests are being done, they're definitely being done by the person you think they're being done by. If interviews are being done, it's definitely being done by someone that you're checking IP addresses, all that kind of thing, and you've got all those kind of techniques in place, making sure cameras aren't being switched, all that kind of thing as things go on, because it's quite sophisticated, some of the stuff that's out there. But also like the applicant, like anyone can write an application now that's basically the perfect application, regardless really of what their background is. And that means that our behavior needs to change in terms of actually checking rather than assuming that the information is being presented to us is right. So I think that's an area that's developing, because there's no doubt about it. applicant behavior is changing as well.
Mm-hmm. But you're getting, so now everyone's writing the perfect resume, match it. So now you're having to dig deeper on the interview process to figure out if what they wrote in the resume really is what they've done, right? So I mean, what I'm seeing, at least on our side, I agree that we're getting twice as many candidates for every job. The resumes look like they match much better. I'm also personally getting way more phone calls and text messages, and like there's overload of information and spam that's coming at me because I may not fit in that. So I think AI.
Can I ask a quick question to the panel? Sorry to interrupt, but how many of us, just quick straw poll, like if your mobile phone rings and you don't recognize the number, how many of you would answer it? Would you ever answer? Like, I think I've stopped answering it altogether. I just like, if it's important, anyone leave a message. Leave a message.
No.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And then I had a client.
Changed.
Absolutely. I had a client phone and say, "Hey, I called you. I can't get hold of you on the phone." I was like, "You're ringing me? Oh my goodness!" That's occurred to me. That's still a thing. Right?
Phone calls now are like faxes in the previous decade, aren't they?
I mean, it's almost like when you used to get ads on LinkedIn that you used to pay attention to them. Now you kind of completely tune them out, and so we're sort of getting to the point where we're getting information overload and just too much stuff coming at us that we're just ignoring all of it. You know, so how do you get in front of those candidates? Because now we're not answering our phones from our clients, right? Yep. And so I do think there's positives and negatives to this, but I think I love to see companies just adopt it more on the corporate side, so that we could actually make some real operational changes in the way the whole recruiting process is done. I don't know, just some ideas around it. Jackie, the Salesforce thing sounds interesting. Can you tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, sure. No, it's super interesting, and I've got to say, for me, being of a certain vintage of age, I dialed into this session quite skeptical myself, thinking, "Goodness, how can an agent automate this process?" But I watched a simulation of a job being provided by the client, of the job going into the recruiter's system, the agent then sourcing or searching around the system, providing a short list, doing a reach out to those candidates to qualify were they available, were the rates correct, were the skills matched, etc. Then coming back to the recruiter's inbox with a shortlist effectively. This all was done within about 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So a job brief, a search, qualification, and then the point where the recruiter then has to intervene is when the shortlist is there and the I guess security kicks in around the verification, the authentication, etc. So that's being plugged into one of our direct sourcing centers in Adecco, where we're again sourcing for large volumes, particularly in offshore locations like Manila, India, and Poland, that helps us process mass volumes. But then it makes sure that the experience for those candidates it feels more high touch if they're not getting FaceTime with the agents or with the consultants, I should say. But for those that actually then are getting the FaceTime, it's a more curated experience also. So that's being bolted on for our direct sourcing. What we've also launched within Adecco Group is a company called Our Potential, and that's a standalone company within Adecco purely to help organizations define and harness how they use AI. So in that example, if we're using this agent for supporting recruitment, then how do we also adopt it to create plugins for the VMS to provide predictive analytics, for example? So Our Potential really is helping, as I say, it's a standalone consulting business to then look at how do we adopt the Salesforce AI potential, but also how do we help customers on their journey, whether it's analytics. We're also building a revised analytics portal that helps them extract data from the VMS that then helps clients understand not what's happened, but what's going to happen, and then how we need to pivot to address that. So lots of moving parts, but I think the Salesforce partnership for us certainly is interesting. And I kind of walked out quite shocked, and I kind of walked in quite cynical, but I left quite mesmerized by the volume. But I think the piece we're talking about today, I think how we also make sure that there's good security around that. I think the banks do a great job, I think, in terms of leading authentication checks. I'm sure if any of you applied for for loans, mortgages, had to verify transactions. I think what you can and can't do with your banks now, I think, is exceptional. So I think we can take a leaf out of the banks' books around authentication and identification, I think, and brought that into the recruiting process. That gives us that assessment. Very quick story also, I recently had a French test online, and it was with an agent, and I thought, here we go, this, and I went to, not that I went to fudge the test, but I thought I might just Google this word, and it gave me a big alarm straight away, and it gave me if my eyes were not in the camera, it sent an alarm bell off. So it was like having a teacher in the room staring at me. It was traumatizing, but I got through it. But that's a good example, I think, of, there's lots of tools we can use to build authentication to make sure that we are driving compliance, security, and we don't fall off at the back end of security for those types of transactions.
Absolutely. Interesting. So everyone, we're at time. I want to leave us with one last, I'd love for each of you to have one last thought or what you're excited about. And then we'll do this again in 6 months. Simon, do you want to start?
Oh my goodness, where to start? Work related about what I'm excited about. I do think I'm actually just going to refer back to things. I think there's a big opportunity for all of us to. I think that there are industry shifts, like seismic shifts happening, scary in one way but exciting in another way. I'm looking forward to that because I think it's down to us to rise to the challenge.
Love it, Ines.
New and emerging solutions. I mean, I love my job, so solutions is at the heart of everything I do. But yeah, really excited for new and emerging solutions to solve the complexity of the landscape today.
Very cool. Kieran?
I agree. I think we've never been in a time where contingent labor has been more interesting, right? Because it's constantly changing, constantly becoming more complex. And I agree with Simon. I think this is an opportunity. There's a lot of exciting stuff ahead of us. There's a lot of difficult stuff ahead of us as an industry, but that's the opportunity. That's the exciting part. I think my final word would be just don't fear it, right? By all means, learn it, get yourself educated if you're a client, but just like Jonah and the whale, go in.
I love that. Embrace the opportunity. And Jackie?
I think for me, just embracing AI and seeing how that evolves. I think it's changing so rapidly. So I think seeing how that changes how we operate, and I think how that also impacts the evolution to a skills-based environment.
Definitely. And Manfred?
I'm looking forward to my summer holiday that's going to start in a week and a half.
Actually, if we're doing that, I'm looking forward to when AI Kieran is paying the mortgage and I can retire early. I'll be his assistant.
You can put your agent on your out of office, Manfred.
Yeah, exactly. Now, to round it up from a business perspective, I'm really looking forward for the next upcoming months, years, because being in this industry for a long time, it always surprises me that I learn new stuff every single day, and it's never a static market. It's never a static thing and industry that we're working on, and that really gets me excited to continue on my journey and on my path.
I love it. But thank you all. This is an honor to have you, and I think it was an amazing conversation. Looking forward to doing it again. I hope everyone found it insightful.
Likewise. Thanks for the
everyone.
invite.
Thanks, everyone.